Qu'est-ce qu'une archive?
What is an
Nous pouvons
archive?
prendre deux métaphores.
You can use two metaphors. Firstly, it is interesting to think of the archive like a living organism. An archive has its own story. An archive changes over time.
Également.
It moves around in space. It modifies itself. It restructures.
Il est impossible de
It is impossible to deal with an archive
en comprendre.
if you cannot understand its singularity.
Sa singularité vient.
And its singularity precisely comes from this long evolution which allows it to be what it is.
L'autre manière de voir une archive,
Another way to see an archive is to use a special metaphor. An archive is an amount, a volume that contains other volumes. These volumes can be books, registers, tables, 3D objects.
grand enjeu de l'archive, c'est
The big challenge of the archive is to organize in one amount these amounts.
prenons un exemple.
For example,
Vous voyez ici
here we have the State Archive in Venice, 80 kilometers of documents that describes 1,000 years of history.
Cette archive est très singulière dans le monde.
This archive in the world is very unusual because Venice, in 1,000 years, has been able to maintain a political organization that allows it to develop a continuous memory.
Ça se traduit par des longues séries
This is translated by a series of documentaries, which is spread over time, and that allows us to approach the long time period. This is also translated by, for example, millions of maps. Maps that are now like forests, that we need to build again and interrogate them to understand their logic, but which potentially help us reconstruct at a high granular level the world before us.
Quel type de document trouvons-nous dans une
Which kind of document do we find in this kind of archive?
Vous allez avoir des
There are administrative documents,
documents de notaire.
notaires' documents,
Vous allez avoir
wills.
des informations sur
You
l'évolution
can find information on the evolution of the town, on what transformations have taken
Ces
place.
éléments étaient
All these elements were for a long time kept in different places in Venice.
et ce n'est que au XIXe siècle
It is only in the 19th century that they were gathered together in a huge building.
aujourd'hui l'archive d'État
And today, the State Archive is in the old convent. 300 rooms, 80 kilometers of shelf space.
cette dédale
A
dans
labyrinth of space where all the memory of the Venice Republic is contained.
nous parlons de l'histoire de la
We're speaking about the history of the town, but also of the history of Europe,
qui est implicitement
which is implicitly memorized in these archives. The challenge is to transform these corridors of documents into an informational system. To make this transformation happen, we can proceed it in 3 stages. The first stage is to create images, millions of images of all these documents, which is what we call digitalization. The second involves indexing, finding words, input, signs that will allow us to look through these documents, the indexing. Third stage, make a big graph that connects all the information which to each other, people, places.
une des utilisations premières, ce serait de
One of the main uses would be create a search engine that allows us to create a service as simple to use as modern search engines. I want to look for the name of a Venetian, Battista Nani, for example, and find documents that talk about this person.
ça semble être quelque chose de simple, mais
That seems to be something simple, but today this work demands from the archivists and historians hours of research.
alors l'archive d'État
So the State Archive, this administrative memory, informs us about all the mechanics of power, the whole structure of the town,
tous les échanges
all the exchanges with the exterior.
quand on veut reconstruire
There is also something when we want to rebuild the past,
à la fondation
and that is, at the Cheney Foundation, we can find a background complementary with the documents that make the iconographical background
dans cet autre lieu à venir
in this other place in Venice.
nous allons trouver des kilomètres de
Once again, we find miles of documents, but this time another kind of document. 1 million photos of pieces of art,
extrêmement longs
covering a very long time frame. And that document for Venice, but also for the rest of Italy, and also for the rest of Europe.
les images
The images,
des œuvres d'art au sens
pieces of art in the broadest sense. We are talking about paintings, about sculptures, we are talking about the interior of buildings. These two resources, the State Archive on one hand and the Cheney Foundation on the other, are going to allow us to do an experiment and allow us to progressively imagine the constitution of an informational systems that combines these two kinds of information to progressively rebuild the density of the past.